Okay, good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on whereabouts you are in the world today. We'll get started here probably in just give it a couple minutes. I know got some other people that I know have registered. We're just going to give it about 2 minutes, then we'll kick off things here. Okay, hello and welcome to MetrixData's 360s webinar today on emerging technologies and their impact on software asset management. I'm Mike Austin, the CEO and founder of MetrixData 360. I am an expert in the software asset management space. Everything from license optimization to compliance and audit to processes and tooling and all of those things. So today, I've been getting asked a lot lately, sort of what are my opinions and what am I seeing in terms of some of the trends or newer trends that are going on in market. So, what is the impact of AI? What do I think that's going to be on the software asset management space? Internet of Things, what's going on there as more and more organizations are building out and adopting strategies of that. We're going to touch a little bit on the cloud, although not one of the newer things. It's an always always changing venture, the cloud, and sort of how you manage that and how you do cost optimization there. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to get into, sort of how to adapt your CAM strategies as these new technologies proliferate in the market. And then we're going to have a real world case study, although it's not really a case study. I'm actually going to show you how you can actually utilize AI to help in software asset management, some of the tasks that you may have there. As always, if this is your first time to one of my webinars, if you do have any questions, please feel free to either ask those in the chat. You can put your question in there. If you want to ask me personally, please feel free to raise your hand. I'll try and keep an eye on that and answer those questions as we go. Okay. So like I said, I'm getting asked quite a bit about what are my thoughts on. Start with AI, we'll go to IoT, and then we'll talk about cloud. But um, I actually just got asked this question by, or a version of this question by my team this morning, actually. But I think with AI and software asset management, there are a lot of people that are playing with it. There's a lot of practical use cases that will come about. But I think the first thing I always tell people when it comes to AI, and when I talk about AI, it could be like the large language models like ChatGPT, Gronk from X, Bard. I think Google just renamed it, Copilot from Microsoft. Those sorts of things. And then there's AI in the tooling itself. But I think a lot of people are kind of thinking about, the ChatGPT pieces of it. They know that it's going to be built in the tooling. But one of the things that I always warn people is licensing is a very complex topic. I've played quite a bit with ChatGPT, probably a few hundred hours now, playing with the various, ChatGPT and Copilot and a couple others, trying to understand how to use it to answer licensing questions and things like that. And the thing that the reason I say be wary is it misinterprets the rules quite a bit. I mean, I've put in, SQL licensing briefs, for instance, asked it very simple questions, and it's come back and ignored things like 4 core minimums and things like that. So I have seen people that are trying to use it. I'd be caution when it comes to answering questions about licensing. I think there's better use cases for it today. I think it's just a complex topic that it's going to take a while for the models to be trained to actually do that sort of thing. But I do believe it can be a definite productivity booster, and that's the business case that I'm going to show here a little bit later on in this webinar. I think it can be a time saver around documentation, about building out standard operating procedures and things like that. I think it could be a productivity booster when it comes to big data and the analytics. I mean, I put big data here. I don't mean in terms of big data, but if you think about the software asset management space and the amount of data that is collected and or monitored, I do think that AI has a play on it. I think it has the ability to review data, especially large sets of data, in a way that a human may not be able to, right? And it might be able to see pattern recognition and things like that that the human eye can't see. And so I do think that that is definitely an area where there's opportunity. I think that this is the area where the tool vendors, when they say that they're going to start integrating AI into their platforms, this is definitely where I believe that they're going to be playing, is looking at that. And I'll talk a little bit more what I think some of those things would look like. Like I said, I think all the tool vendors are going to be saying they're AI driven or building AI into their tools. It's kind of like the catchphrase right now. If you're not putting AI in your tools, you're going to fall behind. But I caution that a lot of it may be logic and or algorithms, not so much true AI. Right? If you think of true AI, you should be able to ask a question and it should be able to answer the question and think of what's next and go to what's next. And I think that is probably a little bit further down the road, particularly in some of these things, but it definitely can assist in that. I think it can really help in root cause analysis, right? Like one of the things that it is very good at is if you ask it questions, you can feed it some data and ask it questions about that data and ask it to provide you multiple different suggestions or answers to those questions, right? So trying to think of an example there, but I'll give a marketing example because it's just the easiest one to sort of demonstrate. If I'm writing a white paper, I can drop in and say, please provide me with a list of 20 titles for my white paper. And I can give it, the topic and things like that. And it'll come up with 20 different answers very, very quickly. And so I do think it can, that's where it can help. But in root cause analysis, when you feed it data and start asking it questions about that data, you can get multiple answers on different ways to view that data very quickly. Right. Well, especially if you know how to prompt these things properly. I think predictive analytics is something that it'll definitely play in the future. I think if you look at and think about if you make changes in the environment, what are the costs to do so from a licensing perspective? I do think that it will be able to play there. I actually think you can use it to forecast changes in cost over time as well, but prior to actually implementing them. So I think it can, watch and see what has changed, but I think you will be able to feed it as well and say, if we make this change, what is the impact? What is the cost going to be? I do believe that it's probably there today. If you really know what you're doing, you should be able to do those sorts of things. I think it's going to be able to suggest changes to end users' technology. So that goes back to that big data piece up there. I think it's going to be able to analyze usage patterns and make suggestions on other technologies, other ways for end users to do things. I think that's a little ways down the road, but I do think it'll be able to do that. I think it's going to make integration with other systems possible. Think about integrating SAM tooling with your ITSM, with your security, with HR systems, those sorts of things. And I do think that you will eventually be able to use it as a chatbot type feature to use it to answer licensing questions on things like the help desk. Right now, I know the first thing I said is it's complex and hard. I think the use cases there today are probably a little bit easier, like things like, having a chat bot that's like, hey, I need a project 2019 license. Are there any available? And it could go out and look in the inventory if your software asset management system set up and come back and give an answer to that. Right. Answer questions like, I need to procure an Adobe Acrobat. What is our agreement? What is the best way to do it? Like, I think those are the sorts of things that you'll be able to do with chatbot type technology here in the near future, right? And so if you look at that from a use case perspective for AI, I kind of break it down into sort of these 5 different categories, right? You got content generation. So like I said, think about things like procedure and policy development. I don't know that AI today could actually create your policy from start to finish, but if you fed it the right information, it definitely can um, help draft it, and it can do that in a much faster way than you can write it yourself. Again, I'll go back to like, well, actually, I'm going to save this because this is sort of what we're going to do in this content generation section when I get into sort of the real world use case here. But use case development is what is the example that we're going to use. Trying to understand, if we do this, what's the impact? If we do that, what's the impact? Can you help build a business case? Those sorts of things. And then I think you can use it to create knowledge bases and things like that. I think a good example of where AI has a good use case is, we don't hear as much about the sort of brain drain. You take all the legacy and you like all the legacy employees that you have that have knowledge of how systems and things work in their head. And anytime you need to know about product X, you just go over and talk to so and so because they're the expert, they know everything, but it's in their head, it's not in paper. I think that this is a way to start creating knowledge bases to pull that information out of their heads. I know, for instance, there's a lot of talk about, say, COBOL developers that are still needed in the marketplace. There are none, potentially using AI as COBOL developers. Definitely some, you want to make sure there's some concern, things done there. But good example of where AI would play there is you take COBOL code and put it into AI and have AI tell you what that code's doing, and then have it rewrite that code in something newer. So look at the business functionality and then rewrite that business functionality in newer code. That's an example of content generation, in my opinion. We talked a little bit about data mining and integration, right? So if you think about, understanding deployments, doing the data analysis, I think that normalization of software titles and things like that is something that AI can do. I think from a security perspective, there's definitely plays there. I know, like, if you look at security and just AI and security products, you think about the amount of log data that you get, you could probably have AI monitor that better than a human to identify abnormalities and whether they're an actual problem or not, and then flag those to go to a human versus trying to get through all that log data yourself. I also think that inside of data, it'll give you a lot of opportunity to look at your data and run, risk analysis and things like that. Do we have, this code in because there's a security vulnerability or whatever? What's the best way to mitigate it? Where is it? How does it, how does it interact with other systems and things like that? Again, down the road, but I do think that that's the type of thing that it can do. I think change management is something where you're going to be able to use it. And probably not data mining integration, but that's kind of where I dropped it here. But think about the impact. Like, we have a client right now that is looking at moving M365 E5 license users to the Microsoft 365 F5 SKU because they're shared workstation users and things like that. Well, there's a change management process that goes there. So how could you use AI to understand their work patterns? So we talked about looking at work patterns and things like that, but also developing the documentation and things like that's needed for those users that are going to have a little bit different experience with Office, as an example there in the future, right? So you could create your training content around change management and things like that. I think you could look for problem detection, right? So have it monitoring systems. Are my connectors all connecting properly? If they're not, troubleshoot root cause analysis on why certain things aren't reporting, things like that. Obviously, alerting. Talked a little bit about that on the security side. So how do we look at data and start having AI do some predictive analytics around it and doing some alerting? A simple example there, I know alerting is not a new concept, but a simple example there would be if A happens, then B happens, alert us, right? So, example as, I don't know, I got an exchange kiosk user, their mailbox hits a certain size, or they use SharePoint for the first time and do something, upgrade their license to this. Again, I think that those sorts of opportunities are gonna come. There's obviously, like I talked about, the use patterns. I think that is a big use case scenario. I think when people look at, we have a lot of conversations with clients that are like, hey, I own, Microsoft 365, for instance. It's got a lot of products in there. What else is out in my environment that, I can get rid of? So you can start to look at the use patterns inside of M365, look at the other products, identify those, maybe look at where people are using other products that other users in the organizations are using products from this, so that you can determine that we thought that only this product could do it, but this product, we have use cases in it that are very similar, and you can move those over. Like, I do believe that those things are going to happen. I think automating feeds and understanding data feeds between systems and having the system determine what data needs to be moved where and when and how. Again, not right away, but I do think that that's an opportunity. An example there would be in a SAM play is, I need to have HR information to supplement my usage information so that I can get, I don't know, payroll, job codes, whatever it is. And you can automate, go and get that data, applying it, figuring out how to do that. It seems like it's something that is easy to do today, but if anybody's been in a project where they do that, there's always challenges. I think AI can make that more efficient. I talked a little bit about chatbot, but like I said, I think that there's an opportunity for, help desk and procurement and licensing type Q&A there. If I do this, is it compliant with our contract? When does our contract expire? How many licenses do we have? Those are some simple things, but I do think eventually it will be able to answer here's a deployment scenario. Tell me how many SQL Server licenses I have in a complex thing. But I think that is quite a bit away, right? Knowledge base is a huge opportunity. I think creating standard operating procedures. So if you think about, all the operating procedures that you need in software asset management, how do you onboard a user, offboard a user, how do you procure software, how do you determine what profile user gets what, all of those sorts of things. What is our policy around vendor audits? How do we address it? What's our vendor audit policy? Like, you can create all of those things. I think you can develop frequently asked questions, not just related to software, but go back to that brain drain that I was talking about, getting some of that knowledge out of the heads of your employees and into some sort of, centralized knowledge base. I think that you'll be able to put repositories of contracts in there and be able to query against the contracts and ask the questions like, hey, do we have a clause that speaks to disaster recovery in our Oracle contract for this product? What is that clause? Please please provide that to me, right? And then, I do think you can do like white paper summary and things like that. White paper / business case probably is a better way to put it. And again, I'm going to show that, so I'm not going to talk a little bit about that. And then I think this is where AI really meets the road, is when it starts to give advice, right? So I've analyzed user A, they can do B, it'll save X, go and do this remediation or optimization of their licensing. We recognize that this happened. It's a compliance issue. You're going to have a risk there. Go and mitigate that in whatever way. I do think that the security play is definitely there. And I do think that you can use ChatGPT today for negotiation tactics. It's actually not bad if you know how to actually go and ask it the right questions on, how do I, negotiate? What's my position? How do I state this to them? How do I do it more aggressively? How do I do it less aggressively? How do I draft this letter back to the vendor to respond to whatever they sent? It's very good at that stuff, actually, right? And I think that's an area that is probably underutilized by a lot of people in the sort of SAM and cost optimization space, right? So I'm going to move from AI over to IoT. I know they're kind of disjointed topics, but the one thing that I want to say is, like, AI is I see it as supplementing SAM and increasing productivity. IoT is more like this is more like a traditional asset management problem. There's all these Internet of Things devices out there, and I got to go and manage them, right? And the IoT world. So you think about like IoT is, think about anything, physical devices that use sensors and software to connect and exchange data. And so, like, this could be, we've got a manufacturing line that device is going down, and we're recording the torque and how much torque we put on the bolt, and whatever it is. There's all kinds of these devices. Like even in our homes nowadays, think about our smart TVs, our smart fridges, our smart stoves, anything that's connected to the network or internet that provides data is an IoT thing. And in the business world, this is becoming, there's a lot of these. Like you think about hospitals and all the connected devices that they have now that maybe weren't as connected in the past, and how they're just automatically monitoring things and the data that you're connecting. And so it increases the complexity of managing assets. So, there is going to become a time, I do know of some organizations that are already starting down this path where the asset management teams, whether that's hardware or the software, like Ham or Sam, just put it into that ITAM category, is going to be asked to manage these things. And it is complex, right? It can be a potential license challenge in the software asset management thing, because the licensing rules are very different. Like it could be like API calls, it could be based on data usage, it could be open source software that you need to be monitoring in the environment because it may have risk for whatever, right, or whatever reasons. So it can definitely be a license challenge. And from a licensing perspective, many of these devices, if not more, like most of them, have embedded licensing agreements. So it's not like going out and procuring Oracle or IBM or Microsoft software. These things come with the embedded licensing, and the rules are embedded in there. And so that is unique, and they differ significantly from traditional licensing. And the challenge is going to be, how do you track this stuff? Right. So I would not say that this is an area in the SAM space that a lot of organizations are doing today. Some organizations are starting to think about it, but I do see it becoming eventually down the road an issue, right? Like I believe at some point in time that software vendors will start to charge, like the Microsofts, the Oracles, the IBMs of the world, the SAPs, the Salesforces. They already have some models that are charging for the usage of these devices against their systems. But I do think that we will get to a place at some point in time where microtransactions are the licensing. And so what I mean by that is, if you sort of think about the app, iPhone apps and the microtransactions that happen. So, you play Candy Crush, or, on my Xbox, my kids are big into Call of Duty or whatever. You're buying stuff inside the game, the microtransactions inside of the game. I think that microtransactions are going to be a big license revenue generating thing for software companies in the future. So, you might, like I said, you might have to pay per the API call, per the amount of data that you're sending over, per the number of device, the number of scans that you make on a scanner, whatever that microtransaction is. I think that eventually will be the licensing model, and it will be very, very lucrative for the software companies. And so if you start thinking about that, how the heck are you going to track that stuff? How are you going to optimize it? How are you going to ensure that you're not wasting money in these things? It might be like, 0.0001 cent, 1/1 millionth of a cent for every transaction. But, if you've got hundreds of millions of transactions an hour or a day on some of these sorts of devices, it adds up very quickly, right? So to manage IoT, like you're going to have an automated tool discovery. There are some tool vendors out there that are starting to think about this and push these things out into the market. But it's going to be the same sort of thing. You're going to have to capture the software that's on these devices. You're going to have to catalog it. You're going to have to be able to track its usage per whatever the required microtransaction, if you want to call it that, is, right? You're going to want to be able to integrate that into your traditional SAM or ITAM practices, right? So how do I put that into ServiceNow? How do I put that into Snow Software or Flexera? How do I build dashboards around it? How do I incorporate those into our current dashboards? All of those problems are still going to be out there, and those are the sort of strategies that you're going to have to think about. And compliance is going to be, something that you're going to have to watch, right? Because you're going once you identify these devices and understand, as these new things start rolling out, understand the metrics and things like that, you're going to want to conduct frequent audits to ensure that you're compliant, right? And that you're cost optimized, because this is going to be one of these places. This is what I mean. I believe this to be a very lucrative area for the software companies, because they're going to charge, fractions of a penny per transaction, and people are going to be like, it's only a fraction of a penny, but then it's going to be cost hundreds and hundreds of millions of transactions, and it adds up fast, right? So I think that is definitely an area that needs to be thought about, and really what's the word I'm looking for? Really, needs to be something that you're going to have to put a lot of thought into. It's going to be a big challenge. Like I said, it's not something a lot of organizations are thinking about today. There are a few that are starting to think about it. I know of a couple of companies that have a lot of devices connected to the internet. A good example there would be something like smart meters, utility meters and things like that. That would be a good example, right? So definitely need to be starting to think through that. So now I'm going to dive into a little bit around navigating cloud, because this is still something that I get asked all the time. Like, what are my thoughts on this? Because as much as cloud's been out there for a few years now, I think the SAM aspects of it weren't necessarily thought through all the way, right? Because the adoption rate of it has been so quick, and it is dynamic, and it is scalable, right? And those pose all kinds of challenges for SAM professionals. Like when you can just log into a dashboard and throw up a bunch of VMs that cost tens of thousands of dollars a month or more without much thought, that becomes a big problem in the SAM space, right? And so the other thing is, like, a lot of the times what's happening is, especially if you think about migrating workloads and stuff like that, you're taking on-premise workloads and migrating those to the cloud. And so, you got applications in there that, think about traditional VMs, you got applications in there, but then if you start to do things like containers and stuff like that, and you got applications in there, normal discovery processes are not going to discover your applications inside of containers. Right. So now I got a visibility problem, and I got a compliance risk. But not to mention that what we see happen is a lot of people are like, I got a bunch of servers, I'm just going to move them over to the cloud. And they think about licensing from the perspective of, Windows OS and Linux, Red Hat Linux, and database stuff and things like that. There are very few that actually look at the applications and all the other software that's in there. And so, the licenses that you own may or may not transfer, right? We worked with one client where there was something like 20,000 different software titles that they were moving to the cloud, and they needed to figure out, are these things compliant to move? And really what we found out very quickly was there were buckets. There were buckets where the software publisher was like, yep, you can use them. We don't care where they're used, no problem. Your licensing transfers, BYOL, no problem. There were a significant number, and we were shocked as we were going through this project of the number of software publishers that do not allow you to take those licenses over. So you would either have to go and renegotiate, or a lot of the cases, these legacy vendors didn't even have models for it. And that was the third bucket, which was, there's no answer. We don't know whether you can or can't, right? And so, I don't think a lot of organizations are thinking like that. And I do think that at some point in time, that will become a audit risk. Now, the question really becomes, whose audit risk is it? Is it yours, or is it Azure's or AWS's? Because if I'm a software publisher, I'd probably audit Azure before I'd audit individuals. And if I didn't have much success there, I'd go after the individuals, because I'd be like, how much of your stuff is out there, and are you licensed for it to be in a public cloud, because it's your infrastructure, right? Now, I'm sure Microsoft and them have indemnifications against that and things like that, but I do think that is a problem, and I don't think a lot of organizations are thinking about that, and or even thinking through it, right? And this stuff requires a lot of continuous monitoring to avoid and optimize your costs, right? And so this is not something that we kind of do once and we're going to look at every year on a true up. Your Azure costs, we monitor organizations, Azure, AWS, and Google cost for them on a daily basis. I don't know how many times in a month that my team is like, just found another one. Somebody spun up a bunch of things and it increased, cost by this, and talked to the client. They didn't know. Somebody, some engineer did something or whatnot, and we shut it off and saved all this money, right? Not even talking waste, just things that happen in the normal operating environment. So you have to monitor that stuff continuously, which is different than traditional SAM. A lot of the times SAM, so on-premise software asset management was like, I have an annual true up. I'm going to look at it once a year on my true up time frame, and that's all I got to worry about. This cloud stuff, whether it's AWS, Azure, GCP, or whether it's SaaS applications, Salesforce, Microsoft 365, Adobe Cloud, you need to be looking at it monthly. Again, I just got word from my team that we just helped a client on their Office 365. We pulled 60,000 a month out of their cost. This is not a large organization. They're only spending about 400,000 a month, but we pulled 60,000 of that out based on waste and things like that we were able to identify. Now it took them, we identified it a while ago. It took them quite some time to get the process changes and things like that, but they were able to save that money. But you got to be watching that every month, right? I have clients that are doing reservations, buying new licenses on Office 365, and we look in their environment, we're like, hey, you guys got like 500 users that haven't even logged into the network in 300 days. Like, why not just pull those licenses back, right? So it requires constant monitoring, right? So we talked about this constant monitoring. You have to work with the cloud providers to understand the terms and the cost models, right? So this is not a pure licensing play, right? It's pay per use, pay for the amount of storage, pay for how many minutes we use it, all of that sort of stuff. I talked a little bit about understanding legacy application and licensing rules. Do not just assume that anything that you're moving over there that you can license over there. I think that's a big red flag. If you're doing that you may end up having problems down the line. You should be looking at what's in those workloads that you're moving, not just can I do Azure Hybrid Benefit on Windows, right? Like what's in there, and what are my rights to move those things over, right? And then you have to embrace, and I would say use to your advantage, the flexible licensing models in the cloud. So scale up and scale down. Look at pay as you go, right? I can give you an example here where there's significant savings that a lot of organizations don't realize, right? So if you take Power BI, it's got these premium nodes. I can buy those in my enterprise agreement, and I pay a per month price on it. And basically that per month price covers my usage for 24/7. And I might get a price advantage over buying that on pay-as-you-go, because I can buy that in Azure and just pay for the actual time I use it. Well, if that Power BI is only used during business hours, so let's say 7 in the morning till 7 at night, 12 hours a day, I'm paying for a full day inside of my EA, and most people are buying it over there, where they can put it in Azure, do auto scaling, and only pay for it for 12 hours a day, and basically drop the monthly cost 15%. Right? So the EA has to be priced better than 50% in that scenario for it to make sense. Otherwise, go pay more per minute, so to speak, and buy it in Azure and take advantage of that flexible meter pay as you go. Right? So that's just a simple example. I do believe that in the next 24 months, there's going to be a meeting of the minds, so to speak, of FinOps and SAM. I think FinOps believe they do SAM, and I think SAM believes they do FinOps, and neither do each other. Right? FinOps is much more around cost and visibility into cost, and SAM is much more around licensing and cost optimization. I think FinOps thinks they do cost optimization. They do some, but not to the level that SAM can. And I think SAM thinks they do finance, but not to the level finance do. But it is a natural place. I'm talking to more and more companies where they now have FinOps teams. Right? They tend to be the bigger ones, but companies are starting to think about that. I think that FinOps as a service is definitely something that we haven't offered to our clients, because I think our smaller clients need that discipline. But I do think these two disciplines are coming together. One of the things that I would say more so than ever is that you need regular and frequent training for your teams. It all changes so quickly. right? Like, just the frequency of things changing, and how they change, and the rules changing. You need to be constantly being up to date, right? Like, it's no longer, I'm just going to learn about licensing once every 3 years when I do a contract. This stuff, you may be even in a contract for 3 years where they make a change that if you take advantage of it right away, you start to save money right away, right? And so you have to be on top of it. You have to have good partners that are helping you understand this. You need to be understanding and learning from the vendors, and having constant, focus and conversations with them about the changes and things that are doing there. And that I can't emphasize that enough. There's definitely a need for policies around procurement, and using a retirement of the cloud to prevent sprawl, non-compliance and overpayment. We see people retiring stuff, leaving zombie resources. Those of you that don't know what zombie resources, it's a disk and other things that are associated with the VM. You destroy the VM in Azure or AWS, and the storage is still there. You're still paying for it, even though it's not used because it wasn't actually destroyed. So you have to have policies around that sort of stuff, right? And so I think that there's definitely a need to relook at your policies. The policies that you had, even if you refresh them 2 years ago, are not going to meet your requirements for what you need to be doing in the cloud. Okay. So I talked a little bit about, showing you how this works. So basically, I'm going to jump into ChatGPT and just show you, one of the things that I said is that you can use ChatGPT to create business cases and things like that, and to be much more effective at doing it. And so I have a scenario where it's a Power Apps usage scenario. I have 2,000 users on an application. And those users, it's an application that's used only in case of emergency. And there might be 5 or 6 of these emergencies in any given year. And so I have a proposal from Microsoft for 2,000 user licenses for Power Apps. We do have a couple hundred users that use Power Apps pretty much every day, very regular users of it, but 1,800 of our users only use it these 4 or 5 times when they use this emergency app, right? And so I'm negotiating with Microsoft, trying to figure out how best to do this, because Microsoft is giving me a proposal, and I'm just going to put this on the other screen. Sorry, Microsoft is giving me a proposal, and I'm trying to figure out what I should buy, and I have to build a business case to take to senior management on this. And so I'm not going to type all this out, but I'm going to drop in this prompt here. Okay. So for those of you that haven't used ChatGPT, when you're asking ChatGPT questions, that is called prompting. By the way, I think prompt engineering is going to become a big thing. That's what I think. If you become proficient at prompting, you'll be able to do a lot. Okay. Now, you'll see in my prompt, I've started it as a prompt engineer, review the following prompt for me, optimize it, make it better, and ask any questions you have before rewording. And then here's the prompt. And so I just summarize what I just said. This is the use case here. So I'm asking it actually to review what I'm asking it to see if it understands it, if it has any other questions. That's where the AI comes in. So I'm using ChatGPT 4. This is the paid version. The free version is 3.5. 3.5 couldn't do this, or wouldn't do it nearly as well, because it's not an AI engine. It's more just an MLM, a large language model, right? So I'm just going to hit enter here. Now watch how quickly this comes up, right? It's going to come up and say, hey, I want to specify the role, here's who you are. Let's talk about the use scenario, right? Because I told it I'm a software asset manager. And it's like, here's an optimized version of your prompt, right? So you can see mine was just a bunch of words, and it was very kind of scattered. It's going to take this prompt and organize it in a very organized fashion, like something that, like, this makes a lot more sense when you read this, a lot more sense than I had, right? And so it's coming up and saying, this is who I am. I work for this company. We have the 200 users. There's an enterprise license, cost this much. There's the 2,000 regular license, cost this much. It's a pay-as-you-go option, it costs this much, right? And so I'm like, this is good, but I forgot to tell it something. I forgot to tell it that under the pay as you go, you don't need to pay, you only pay the monthly charges. Okay, so I'm just going to clarify that. Oh, I forgot to put yes. Let's see what I cut and paste wrong there. Let's see if it understands that. Actually, I probably confused it with the S. So I'm just going to repaste my prompt. I should clarify that you do not need to pay if you're not using it a month, right? That's basically what I'm saying to it here. So it says, yep, I get it. I'll revise the prompt, right? So it's going to rewrite the prompt. And then it says, hey, Mike, does this revision make sense? Now, I'm obviously reading this if I'm doing this. I've run this scenario before. So I'm like, yes, this is great. Please proceed. So now it's going to take that and going to build out our cost analysis here. Right. So not only I've asked it to give us the pros and cons, right? So it's telling us enterprise option one's going to cost 800,000 a year. Here's the pros. Here's the cons. Here's the regular users plus pay as you go. Right. So here's what it's coming up with here. Right. So it's basically calculating this based on total cost for 3 emergencies a year, because I think that's what I told it in the prompt. And there it goes, right? So now it's giving me our total cost, right? And it's giving me the pros and cons of the 3 scenarios that I asked it to run, right? So I'm like, that's great, but how many months would the emergency app need to run to justify buying the 2,000 options? Right? I'm not very good at math. I don't want to figure this stuff out myself. So it's going to come and it's going to do this calculation for me. Right. So it's going to recap the scenarios. It's going to tell us how many months here. So it's like giving me a lot of detail how it's doing it, right? But the good thing is now I can actually go through. This is where I said sometimes makes errors. So I can go through and follow this and go, yeah, this actually makes sense. And this would be the calculation. I don't have to figure this out. This calculation is not all that complex, but think of some of the more complex ones, right? So okay, so I'm good with this. I think this has what I need. I'm like, now I'm going to ask it, are you able to create a summary chart that would go into a PowerPoint for the business case? So let's see what it comes up here with here. So it's going to come up with a header and the columns. Let's give that a second. So see, now it's going to create it. It's even going to be able to create a visual representation. Again, the free chat GBT 3.5 couldn't do this part. This is definitely a feature of chat GBT 4, which is the paid version here. So now it's giving me it's even giving me a nice slide that I could use if I wanted to, right? So I could actually use that image in my slide if I wanted to. So now it's asking me, let me know anything else. I'm like going to remind it that it's a prompt engineer and I want you to create a, content for 3 or 4 slides to go into a business case that needs to be presented to management. So basically now what I'm asking it to do is create my outlines for, my slides, create the content that goes on my slides. So I don't know about you. to create a business case slide deck like this would probably take me a few hours. I'm not very good at it, to be honest. But you can see how quickly it is creating. This is what I mean. This is where it becomes a productivity enhancer, right? So this is very, very quickly giving me, some information. It's building out the slides. Right. So is there anything else? I think this is good. I think slide one could use a chart. Can you, redo that? Right. So I'll just get it to redo slide one, put a chart in. Okay. So anyways, then what the last thing I would ask it to do here is just to re-summarize all the slides. I'm not going to do that part. Because what I want to do is get them all into one sort of prompt here, right? Because what I can do is I can actually copy its answers. But I would ask it to put just put all the slides into one, re-summarize them all so that I had them nice and organized. I did that and I put it into a Word doc because I want to show you how else you can use AI to really help, right? So what we just did is we built a business case for this scenario, right? This is a scenario where clients got to think through this, figure this out. We built the business case and we built the content for a presentation, right? So now I'm going to go back into PowerPoint here and just pop out. I'm just going to create a new one, and I'm going to use Copilot, right? So what I'm going to ask Copilot to do, just give me 1 second here. I copied and pasted, just so you know what I'm doing here on my other monitor. I copied and pasted the slides, the summary of the slides. And in order to use Copilot, it has to be on a OneDrive. So what I'm actually going to do is I copied and pasted the slides into a Word doc. I'm going to ask Copilot to create a presentation from that, right? And so this will take a couple of seconds, but it's going to take this Word document that I had, and it's going to take what ChatGPT put together and pull it together into a slide deck for us. Now, if you have corporate templates and things like that, you can use Copilot to do those sorts of things, right? But it definitely will put this together for us. And so we'll give that a couple of seconds because it is going to take a couple of seconds for it to create this. But this is what I mean. This is how AI starts to play a role, right? So even if we're not using AI to necessarily, do what I'll call real SAM functions, these are things that you would do in a day as a SAM practitioner, as a purchasing person. And I just used AI in 10 minutes, created a business case in a real world scenario that is going to be put into a executive presentation here in a couple of seconds. We add about 80%, I think. So it's adding some speaker notes and stuff like that. Now I have my presentation. Now, is this presentation going to be perfect? No. Right? As a human, you're going to want to go through this and edit it. I think AI will get better at this, but did it get the agenda right? Probably, but I don't need visual elements and chart data because see, this is where AI falls down today, is it's not smart enough to know I was telling it to put those things in. Those weren't things that I needed it in. I just wanted a visual element, right? And so, yes, I got to go through and clean this up. But you look at this, there's my nice chart that I asked to put together. That's pretty good, telling me what I wanted to see. Here's the different licensing options. Here's the break-even point analysis. Whatever I need there, it's there, right? And so I don't probably need all of this. I need to clean it up. But instead of me spending 3 hours trying to figure out how to build this, I've got about 60% of it built. Now I'm just going to go and clean it up. And my business case for this purchase is basically built. Now I'm going to show you some of the silly stuff it does, because look, it's like, hey, show us some contrasting tower, because ChatGPT, I just copied and pasted everything it said. It was telling me in my slides to use contrasting colors and stuff like that. So this is where AI is not intelligent today, right? It's taking the instructions where, and actually literally putting those into my slides. So I thought I'd just show you that because I find that kind of found that kind of funny when I was going through this, right? But that is how you can use AI today and do something that is practical, right? Like I said, we just did that in about probably less than 10 minutes. When I did it the first time, it was probably a little closer to 20, 25 minutes because I was typing out the prompts and reading through everything, making sure that it had what I needed, and asking it to restate things to make it a little bit clearer. But that's how you use it. Now, I do get asked, what do I think of Copilot? I've been playing with ChatGPT and Copilot. I can't get Copilot to do what I just did in ChatGPT. That's why I do it over there, just if anybody's interested to know. Okay, let me go back to my original presentation here. I'll put this back in presentation mode. So let's just, summarize. Let's talk about some of the best practices for adaptive SAM, right? There's the continuous learning and improvement. You have to, right? The new technologies, market trends, all that sort of stuff. Understanding how to use ChatGPT, right? Like I just showed you how you could use ChatGPT to build a business case. Like I said, you could use it even in, I'm negotiating something with a vendor and I don't know how to talk to them about it. This is what they said. This is kind of what I want to say. Help me write a response or give me some talking points. You can use it to do all of those sorts of things. Brainstorm with it, like give me some ideas on the best way to approach this, like it'll help free up your thinking and stuff, right? So use it as a feedback mechanism on your past challenges and successes and document it, right? So this has worked for me in the past, this didn't work for me in the past, what do you suggest, right? Those sorts of things. I do think that there's an integration with IT and business. You're going to have to integrate your SAM tools and processes with other systems like the ITSMs and the cybersecurity, HR, etc. And you're going to have to align your SAM objectives to the broader business strategies, right? I think a lot of organizations have struggled to get SAM programs up and running, mostly because they try and do it as a cost savings, but it really becomes a cost, not necessarily a cost savings when not done properly. And so what SAM professionals need to realize, like this slide is not presenting well for some reasons, but what it says there is the custodians of data, right? I believe that data is the key to all of this. So if you think about, if you really look at what a SAM program wants to do, it wants to save money, through cost and license optimization, and make sure we're compliant with software contracts, then put governance around that. Data is key to all of that. And so SAM people become the custodians of data, and you have data that the business can use and needs to use, and you need to find ways to present that data to the business in useful ways, right? You definitely you definitely need to be thinking through vendor management. Like you need to develop strong relationships with your software and cloud vendors to gain the insights into these product and licensing changes as a SAM professional. You should be meeting with them regularly to understand the changes, what they're doing, what new things they have, all of that sort of stuff, and then use use licensing terms to negotiate flexible things. That scenario we went through is there's 3 ways you can buy Power Apps. And we went through that business case was really to say which of these 3 ways is the best and provides us the best pricing, because there's flexibility in the way that I can buy this. I can buy it in these licenses up front. They'll give me a price if I buy 2,000 or more. They'll give me another price if I buy less, and I got a pay-as-you-go option where I only pay for it if I use it in any given month. That is flexibility. How do I use that flexibility to my advantage, right? I do think that you're going to have to start thinking through technology-specific strategies for IoT. If you're not doing IoT today, I do think it's going to ramp up. I know it's been talked about for years, but we're seeing more and more use cases of it. And I'm getting asked a couple of times a quarter now about strategies around it. So I do think it's coming. And for cloud, you're going to have to adopt real-time monitoring and optimization tools for cloud usage. And that's not Datadog, right? Like Datadog is not the answer to these things. You're going to have to adopt real-time monitoring and optimization for your cloud usage, and look at it daily, right? And understand what's going on. I do think you want to leverage AI cautiously today, right? Because like I said, it makes mistakes. Like I said, I went through that scenario fast. It made a couple of mistakes. And I would correct that if I wasn't doing a quick demo of it. But so you have to be cautious on how you use it, but it definitely can be used to increase productivity. That scenario is a real world scenario. In the past, that probably would have been 5 hours of time working with a client to try and build that out, understand all the models, educate them on the models, build that business case, and it was done inside of an hour, right? So it definitely increased productivity 5x, right? So I think that's where you're going to be able to use it, not just in like business case, but building out SOPs, documentation of how things are done, summaries. Like it is great. It is really good at, if you feed it documents, of summarizing those documents. So sometimes we'll get legal contracts and throw them in and like, okay, can you summarize around these areas? And it can do that fairly well. You can get proposals from vendors that are complicated, tens of pages, hundreds of pages even, and drop it in and say, like, summarize these. I'm looking for these key points. Is this in there? Those sorts of things can be done. I think you have to be thinking about these things from a scalability and a flexibility perspective, right? It's no longer put in a SAM tool and that's it. You have to design your processes to be able to handle the growth of the business and the adoption of technology and the expansion of those technologies without losing effectiveness. And that's not easy, right? And then I think you need to encourage flexibility in your procurement, and in order to use and take advantage of the best tools and technology available, but also to take advantage of the flexibility that is built by design into these newer things like cloud, cloud, like the scenario we just went through. So that's kind of it. Hopefully, I know this one was a little bit different than our normal, where we're diving deep into like some topic on SAM, but I've been getting asked quite a bit lately on sort of my thoughts and where I see the market going and those sorts of things. So hopefully this was helpful and educational. I appreciate you guys coming out today, and thank you very much.